Allegedly, a person at the age of 69 should know who they are. I have the luxury of not really knowing, but I hope to know in time. At the same time, I am an Irish person. I was born in Dublin in a nursing home that was next door to the house of a lovely Irish novelist called Elizabeth Bowen, and which I think was important because I must have imbibed something in those early bottles of milk. It began with a memory that I had when I was 6 or 7. There's a house in the book called Queenstown Castle, and there's a little boy and his mother in the turret flat, which is a very small little part of this Victorian castle. And I was that little boy, I believe. And one day in that place, wandering around as small children do, looking in places where you're not supposed to look, I looked in through an open door, and there was a large man sitting in a wicker chair with his back to me in a rather bare room, which was his apartment, looking out on the very, very beautiful vista of the sea and the island and the rocks and the cormorants in great silence, and smoking, as I could detect, a little cigarillo, which is a little black, short cigar type of cigarette with the smoke going up from him. He didn't turn around. I never spoke to him. I don't know who he was. He lived there near us like a spider. I never heard anything about him from anyone else. But years and years and years later, when I was beginning to write this book, I began with him. I didn't know what he was going to say or who he was going to be. I moved myself into the room like a camera and a microphone, like we're doing now, just to witness him and have access to his mind. And he surprised me every second of the book because he was able to talk about some of the things that have troubled me most as a human person and as an Irish citizen and as a child, as a son, and indeed as a father. It's called Old God's Time in English because this is a phrase that rarely heard in Ireland nowadays, but it was one of my grandfather's phrases. Old God's Time is, you could say something happened to you as a child and then you say, well, that was in old God's time. In other words, it's a different dispensation. It's not the modern era. It's long, long ago. And this is what Tom's brain is doing. He's being obliged to revisit things that he would so much rather continue to forget. So it's a difficult book in that sense, but I was very anxious that in his great kindness in giving me the book, I would be able to return his kindness with some sort of award or reward at the end of the book, which I strove to do. Ireland is notoriously beautiful. Well, I mean, we have our uglinesses as well, visually. We've managed to partly destroy a great Georgian city since independence, especially in the 70s. But there's something for me almost violently poignant about the fact that terrible things can happen in the midst of natural beauty. It just so happens that Tom Kettle has retired to that little room beside the sea in Dalkey. And as a little boy, I was unconsciously in this beauty, but I did respond to it as a little boy, and I loved it. And I loved the deep, dangerous channel of water between the end of our garden and the island. I never went to the island. So he has arrived there with his story in his head. And it's one of the solaces of the book, in writing the book for me, that I was able to reconnect myself also with this place. I went there last year or the year before with a BBC crew, and I was a bit worried that it wouldn't be beautiful. You know, I only half remembered it, but it was. It was, and not for nothing now, that coast is occupied mostly by rock stars. Bono has a house further along. In those days, it wasn't like that.